Yeah! Was
That's
ist
it.
los?
We're live.
I've been
That
doing
was
that
in
for like a minute just so we caught that live portion.
That is a repeat of what
Yes.
happened in the visitor center
Right.
at Tomatin. So,
Right. Which is why are we yelling Schnell?
recently,
Yeah.
mid-May, we were in Scotland.
Right.
We traveled up to Inverness.
Oh, love Inverness.
Scott Adamson came out and met us, took us to lunch.
Dinner.
Next day, gave us a nice in-depth tour at Tomatin, a little private tasting in the warehouse.
I can now pick up what was described and is dunnage.
Yep. What brings us to this point, though, is a couple of live streams we've done with Tomatin with Scott and Ken. And we got turned on to this from a sample. What you can only get at the distillery is a PX Distillery exclusive, phenomenal whiskey. We've been preaching it. People have been buying it.
People have been going and visiting the center and calling ahead saying, "Save me one."
We went there. I traveled across the high seas.
Yeah, well, through the mountains, through the air, across the high seas.
We went by the Loch Ness.
We survived
saw Bessie
and down our gassing.
Nessie. I got to the distillery. I bought 2 bottles.
Yeah, you said two, and then I even said, "Give me one of these and the 90," and you're like, "Get the 2. Go for 2. You're really pushing the PX."
The other release, they've got 5 releases. Right. We'll let Scott talk.
Yeah, he'll get in a second.
There's a Virgin Oak. There's a ex bourbon. There's the 90s. There's a Oloroso sherry and the PX. I always thought I was an Oloroso fan,
right?
Until I had their PX.
Bam, Nirvana.
So, Scott, go ahead, introduce yourself. That's what got us here.
That's what got us here. We're going to say more.
That's right. How are you doing, guys? I'm Scott from Tomatin, for anyone that's not joined us on one of these before. But yeah, it was great to have you over at the distillery finally after a couple of live streams. But I definitely think the best preaching you've done is to the couple that were in the visitor center that day looking at the Oloroso cask.
And that was the Schnell. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But so, ambassador for Tomatin.
That's right.
And just give a little snippet about the visitor experience from the professional side, and then we'll get to the YouTuber side in a second. So you explain in your terms, the professional terms, how they go about touring and getting these.
Yeah, so we've actually had a visitor center at the distillery since around about the mid-90s, I think. So we've been doing tours for a while, but it's really been in the last few years that we've really ramped up I guess you would call it the experience side. A long time ago, it was a person showing people a distillery and you would have a taste at the end and then get back on your coach bus. But now we're trying to tailor it a little bit more and do a little bit more options of the tours you can get. You can get a really basic introduction to Scotch whiskey right through to the single cask experience. And the single cask experience is where people go and they try the 5 casks that are only available to buy at the shop at the distillery. So yeah, like you said there, we've got 5 casks. It starts with a Virgin Oak. I think that's about 5-6 years old at the moment. So quite a young whiskey in terms of what our range normally looks like, but rammed full of that oaky North American oak flavor. Really interesting stuff. Then we've got a 10 or 11-year-old fully matured in ex-bourbon barrels. That's one I love. Then there's the Oloroso fully matured. And it's interesting, these are whiskies that we wouldn't necessarily have as a general release, but they're great when you're there to show you how we build the flavor of our whiskies. So the Oloroso in itself is quite powerful with the Tomatin spirit, but normally we would mix that together with some bourbon matured stock to create like our 12-year-old. And then we've got the now Scotch Test Dummy famous PX edition, which we can't get enough casks of it through the door now because it keeps selling with what you guys have been talking about. And then the final one is the 1990 that Bart picked up when he was over.
I'd like to take credit for that, but we told like 5 people were watching us when we had that one, but then those 5 people went and told 5 people, and those 5 people told 5 people.
To be honest, it was our blind tasting. So not only did we do the sampling live, but then we do the blind 16 bottle, and what wins from both of us, blind.
Yeah, 16 bottles we both picked
16,
out.
and this rises above the rest. And I know you said after we had that show, so people have seen what we've done blind, and they start calling and saying, I'm coming up to visit, please, park one of those.
Yeah, so it's interesting, that first cask there that you did the blind on, that was the first Pedro Jimenez cask that we had. It's what I've got in my glass at the moment as well. And that was in the visitor center for about a year. Now, it's a sherry butt, so you're going to get maybe 600-700 bottles out of it. It's quite a big cask. And it sat in the visitor center for a year, slowly dripping away. And it just so happened that the day that you released your the final of the sherry shootout, that was when the cask was naturally emptied. So we had people calling about that one, asking if we could hold some of the final bottles that had already been bottled up aside. We did that, and I just found out on Thursday that the most recent cask is already gone.
Wow.
So that's now from taking a year to go through a cask to 5 months. So there definitely is a Scotch Test Dummies effect. That's what we'll call it.
Nice.
The dummy effect.
Yeah.
Speaking of the dummy effect, now we're bottling, we're there. Scott's picking up 2 more of those not this one, but the new PX. I'm getting one. I'm getting this. The German couples there. Now you tell this, and then I'll get into my yelling.
I had filled mine up, and I was filling out the labels, which you do by hand. Mm-hmm. And I heard a German couple behind me, and the female was talking about the Oloroso. So just as I'm done, I think you were up next, but I said, I just say, I thought I was an Oloroso man too until I had their PX, and it blows it away. That's all I said.
Yeah. Well, you said you're going to want to get it.
No.
I think you said
that was it.
That was it.
That was it.
Okay, that was it.
I make my own choices. You don't tell me what to do.
Right. But she wasn't mad at you.
It was an angry voice.
That's just a German woman.
German people like to be angry.
Yes, German people just
Stern,
say
I would call
it
it
very
stern.
directly. You don't make her decide.
And I go, no, I'm just.
But they just sound angry.
And I said, no, just try them. And try the PX and the older. I make my own choices.
But then they try them.
Yeah.
And
I was watching.
Right. And they go, oh yeah.
They bought the PX.
And then so they're getting that bottled. And then as you're coming back in, I'm yelling, Was ist los? Schnell, schnell. What is up?
Because I told you guys, like, that is an angry German woman over there.
Scott comes in. Oh, hey, you're in the visitor center. Hey.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm German descent.
My side of it as well was quite different because that was the one day of your trip that you were on a bit of a tight schedule. Roy had planned a trip to Ballindalloch afterwards, and me being me, I got carried away and started pouring far too much whiskey. And
you were not carried away enough.
Yeah.
Roy's plans and our plans are different.
That is correct.
That's right. And I think everyone's mind started to go to, what are we going to do for lunch? Because we don't have time to stop anywhere on the road. So I decided I'll go down to the local Tomatin shop. I'll buy some sandwiches, some crisps, some soda, and go back to the visitor center. And I walk back into the visitor center. I've not seen your interaction with this couple at all. And all I see is Bart, all 6'6" of him, standing with Ken, our tour guides, wearing the hat. And Bart is just shouting, Schnell, Schnell.
That's right. Ken has the hat on. Yeah, you walk into that scene.
I didn't know what had happened in the 5 minutes that I'd turned I can't leave you alone for a moment. It was, yeah.
Real quick. Woo-hoo. That's all around the block.
Yep. Aspen K. Anderson.
Hi, guys. I sponsor that cheese to Bart, and number 7 looks like he likes it a lot.
I love
Stahl
the Gouda.
from Norway.
All right, 125 and NOK dollars. I don't know if they're called dollars.
I don't know.
Krona, Norwegian krona.
There you go. Very nice.
No.
So honestly, though, I would tell
you, Espen.
Anybody that's going to Scotland,
first of all,
you need to go to Tomatin. You need to try this release.
And when you're in the visitor center, just let it be heard. You're going to hear Schnell, Schnell. That means go quickly and get you some of the PX.
Solid advice.
Yes. Yeah, I think if they yell Schnell, they should get like $1 off.
Yeah.
You'll be like,
a free bag to carry it in.
yeah. You'll be like, no, we're not doing that.
Well, what's also great is that there's going to be 3 people go into the visitor center on Monday before I get there and tell the team what's happening, and they'll be like, "Why are all these people shouting Schnell again?"
There's a lot of Schnell in here. What is going on? Yeah, you did come in and you're like, Bart, it's the visitor center. Like it's public. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I know. And you're like,
Yeah.
Let's take that to
Another distillery.
Yeah. You're like, let's go to this other place.
Yeah.
We need to get out of my house.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other bottle that I actually poured, though, Bart picked up there at the distillery, is a 1990s distillate.
Right.
Actually distilled in September of 1990, bottled May of 19 when we were there. Almost 29 years old.
Yeah, so what you've got there is a 28-year-old fully matured in a bourbon barrel, first fill bourbon barrel. So it's interesting. A lot of our stock at that sort of age is stock that would have been laid down in refill casks and then moved to bourbon barrels. So it's quite unique to get something that's been fully matured for that 28 years in the bourbon.
Macallan Fine and Rare is asking, so which PX is available now? Is the other no?
Yeah, so right now we're on the last few bottles of the one that you bought when you were over there, and that's a 2001 cask with a 7-year, 7-month PX finish. So I think we're on the last 10-15 liters of that spirit in the cask. So that will be gone pretty soon. And then we're now in the process, the distillery manager, Graham, he's asked for the samples to be drawn for the next batch. So he's going to be nosing and tasting them next week. And I would like to think it's going to be one of the sister casks. We have some casks around that are the same age, distilled on the same date, finished on the same date. So really, really similar, as close as it's going to get, but there will be the different nuances from cask to cask. So that's what's coming next. And we're actually bringing that cask down to the Edinburgh Whiskey Fringe Festival at the start of August. So every August there's a festival organised by Royal Mile Whiskies. And they asked this year if we would do a bottle your own at the show. And obviously with the popularity of the PX cask, that's what we're going to bring with us as well. Nice. So the people that are there for that weekend will get the opportunity to buy one. But other than that, it's all at the visitor centre.
Beautiful.
Well, and you already answered it a little bit. Everwind had asked earlier to ask you, do you think whiskey tubers, the YouTubers, are starting to influence the distilleries?
Do you know, it's really interesting because when I was last on with Roy, I was asked that same question. And I didn't really have an answer for it. I hadn't seen it, you know. I don't think Tomatin had felt that effect yet. We get great reviews, but it's very it's not like Ralphie's Whiskey of the Year or anything. We've not had anything like that to compare with. But yeah, from even a thing like the Merry Sherry Christmas, the pickup the next day, I get to work the next day, hadn't actually seen the video because it had aired during the night with us. And I had 3 emails waiting before I even got to the office. Can I get a bottle? And I was starting to think, did these guys give my email address out? How are people getting in touch with me directly? What's going on here? But no, so yeah, I think we're starting to see it a little bit more.
Very good.
A couple questions on the prices. The PX, the latest PX that we got is almost 18 years old. It's like 17 and a half years old.
That's right.
And it's 90 pounds.
95 pounds.
95 pounds. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The 1991 is a little bit higher. It's coming in at 280, 300 pounds.
I think I want to say 250. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's about 250 pounds.
Okay.
250. Yeah.
Somewhere in there. Yeah. I'm sipping it now and it's gorgeous. It's very nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I actually don't have that with me. So I'm going to have a whiskey that I can't get over here. So I was over in your neck of the woods a couple of weeks ago and managed to bring back a sample of our Tomatin 21-year-old, which is exclusive for North America. So we don't get any bottles of this over here.
I haven't seen that one either.
Yeah, so it is. It's a limited offer. I think we did 2,000 bottles of it. 21 years fully matured in bourbon barrels for North America. So I managed to get a little sample. The whole idea was that I was going to drink this on the plane on the way home, but I got hit by the jet lag pretty hard and woke up and I had to drive the next day. So I thought I'd keep it for tonight.
Nice.
Real quick, cowbell.
Cowbell, Jesse
Jesse
Boyson.
Boyson, $2. Another German story. Do whatever you want.
Who knows about that one?
We'll do that one. Yeah, that one's only told in private.
Right.
Not online.
Can't tell that one at the Distillery Visitor Center.
That qualifies Bart to yell Schnell.
Yeah,
Schnell.
Schnell!
Also.
I don't even think I heard that story, so we'll wait till we're off air.
Not even then.
Yeah,
That's in person. Yeah.
yeah. That's got hand actions and choreography and everything, right?
Yep.
I'm loud.
DHL says he saw the Tomatin 36 there for around 300. It was probably a little bit higher. We picked that one up last year for 560, which I think was the base price on it. It's gone up. I know it's I've seen it in the $800 range here lately. And it was once I got back from Scotland, I went and sat down, even the wife, and tried some of that bottle, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah, so you're going to be able to get our 30-year-old for about £300, and then the 36-year-old is up at around about £600 now, so $800 sounds about right. We've got the 30-year-old at a slightly lower price.
Touch on that a little bit, Scott, because we fielded some questions in the past just because of how reasonable your whiskey is.
Yeah.
And what I learned, when you was walking us through there, you talked about how big Tomatin was in the 70s.
That's right.
Which I'd never realized. And you guys doomed yourselves, per se.
Yeah, so I guess an aspect of the pricing goes back to Tomatin's history, and the 70s really is that touch point. In the 1970s, 1974, we expanded to become the biggest distillery that had ever existed in Scotland by that point. So there were 23 stills, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that was capable of producing about 12.5 million litres of alcohol, pure alcohol, We never quite hit that. And one of the old mash men told me the tale that at that time we had 2 mash tuns functioning as well, which is quite unique in Scotland. From the vast majority of distilleries have 1 mash tun. We had 2 operating. And we would do 78 mashes a week. So that meant that 78 times a week, 8 tons of barley were being mashed. And the old mashman told me the tale that there was one week that they tried to run 80 mashes, so 1 extra mash per ton, and the power cut out. So we were never able to reach the full capacity, but still made a huge amount of whiskey. And this was really at the time before any of the big conglomerates were formed. So the way the industry worked back then is that a blender would buy from multiple companies, multiple distilleries to get their spirit. And then into the 1980s, there's a real downturn in the industry. People are drinking a lot more vodka, a lot more gin. But the whiskey producers don't really keep up with the lessening of demand, and they overproduce. And at that time as well, you get a lot of the bigger companies forming. So even coming out of the 1980s, they're able to get the supply of whiskies from within their own company now, rather than having to go out with and buy from a distillery like Tomatin. So in the 1980s, we went bankrupt. And then when we came back on board in the 1986, it was never at that massive scale again. So that's meant that nobody's got huge amounts of whiskies, but we've got nice parcels of stock that allow us to release some older expressions at pretty reasonable pricing as well. And I think it was interesting. I was, like I said, over in Texas and California a couple of weeks ago and having this discussion quite a bit. And it went back to the idea that Tomatin is a top 10 brand in America now, the 10th biggest single malt in the market. But you're never going to see us in a James Bond film or on a massive billboard or anything. So we've always been of the mindset that the best way to get people to engage with our brand is to get them to try the product. So if that means having a better price point on the shelf so that you're more inclined to pick up a bottle of Tomatin and try it and become loyal to that, I think that's a better way of doing it than charging twice that amount of money, but having a massive marketing campaign to go along with that bottle, which still costs the same amount, but you're paying for a marketing campaign as well.
So you guys had the way you had put it was Tomatin had been, distilling all this, and it was being sold to blenders. They never really set aside stock for them to keep themselves.
That's right.
Albeit, single casks or just whiskey to age for themselves. It was all sold to blenders. Once everybody quit buying from them, they went bankrupt. You guys sold to a Japanese firm for $2 million. Who wouldn't want to buy a distillery for $2 million
goodness.
now?
Yeah. I know. If you had a crystal ball back in the middle of the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the Japanese bought the distillery. They were actually our biggest customer at the time, a company called Takara Shutsu. They were buying a lot of our whiskey into Japan for blending there. And so they decided very simply that rather than lose the supply of whiskey, they'll buy the distillery. And that's been great for us because at that time they became the first Japanese company to fully own a Scottish distillery. And that very much meant that they've kind of left us to it. They've not really come on and told us this is how you're going to produce whiskey now, this is how you're going to market it. The Tomatin Distillery Company still has its headquarters at the distillery, which is unique for a Highland distillery. A lot of them are Glasgow, Edinburgh based, still make fantastic liquid, but we get to be there. And it means that when a cask runs out in the visitor centre, we can get samples drawn up and be tasting them next week for the next cask, and have that interaction with the people coming to the distillery, which we think is quite good. So yeah, it's been a huge change since then. And like you say, a lot of the stock that we produced in the 1960s, 70s was sold. So a big thing that we've had to do going into the early 2000s, our strategy changes and we decide that we're going to start focusing more on our own brands than ever before. And a big part of that was buying back a lot of the stock that we had already sold. So a lot of the stock that we had sold in the 70s, because of the crash in the 80s, still hadn't been bottled. So we had to buy back the parcels that we could. And part of that so that we've got the stock for our own products. The other part of it is so that we can control where the liquid goes and what's done with it. The last thing we would want is for a bottle of Tomatin to show up that didn't meet our standards.
Roger. Yeah. That's awesome.
Error McFault is asking, what are the plans with Kuboken? Any limited editions coming up?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about Kuboken at the distillery. I gave you two secret samples, really, because they are just about to be released. So in the next, what date are we at now? In about a month's time, keep refreshing your Google feed, because we're doing some really interesting stuff with Kuboken. We've been working on it a lot over the last year, just to really nail where we want the brand to be, what we want the brand to represent. So that's all going to unfold in the next month. And there are two new limited releases to go along with that are really exciting, really interesting. I hate when you see a press release from a distillery and it uses the word innovative, because there's not a lot of innovative things going on in the whiskey industry, especially the Scotch industry right now, because it's so tied up in its regulations and its history, which is a good thing as well. But this is as close to real innovation as we're going to get. So Kuboken in the next month is going to be interesting.
And Tom R asks, please ask if Tomatin has ever sold to Compass Box.
Not directly. I don't believe. But I do know that, as from what I can tell, they do have some Tomatin stock. But the way that that would work is it would be stock that we had sold to a blender, for example, and they've needed something else. So they've traded with a whiskey broker, and then that broker's gone on to sell to Compass Box.
Okay.
Now we are getting ready to have some music come in. So why don't we do this? Scott, give out some information on like website, things like that, where people can find you, or if they want to get information on a tour. Why don't we do that real quick?
Yeah, so if you want any information on Tomatin, it's very simply www.tomatin.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, as well as Tomatin, Tomatin Whiskey, Tomatin Distillery. And you can get in touch with us if you want to know anything about the tours. There's a section on the website, but you can email us as well. So, for example, me, I'm scott@tomatin.com. Really easy to get in touch with me. If you want to get in touch on Instagram, that's where I normally hang out, and that's very simply Scotch_Adamson. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Scotch Adamson. I was trying to remember that there.
You're good.
We'll have time.
Hang
We'll be
tight.
back
Don't
to
go.
talk
We're
some
going to
more.
come back to you. We're
Kevin,
going to kick it
Dan.
over for a little bit of our first music. We wanted to do why we had you on, because everybody loves Shakes and Cousin Shane.
Oh, that's good.
And he's drinking the Tomatin, the PX
That's
Distillery.
right. Yes, lock him in.
What is it? Snell, what?
Schnell, Dr. Jones.
And buy it. All right, ready?
We're muted.
Drinking dark whiskey and tell a white lie. One leads to another on a Saturday night. But don't you cross your heart unless you hope to die. Drinking dark whiskey and tell a white lie. Well, the first drop burns, but the second one goes down smooth. Then that old black label, it gets a hold of you. It'll loosen your tongue, but it don't ever tell the truth. Drinking dark whiskey and telling white lies. One leads to another on Saturday night. But don't you cross your heart unless you hope to die. Drinking dark whiskey and telling white lies. When the bottle starts talking, be careful what it might say. 'Cause it talks in the dark like it never would in the day. Then you get into trouble as soon as it gets his way. Drinking dark whiskey and telling white lies. One leads to another on a Saturday night. But don't you cross your heart unless you hope to die. Drinking dark whiskey and telling white lies. Well, a little white lie don't mean anybody no good when it's making the rounds all over the neighborhood. Then the next thing you know, we're all misunderstood. Drinking dark whiskey and telling white lies. One leads to another on Saturday night. But don't you cross your heart unless you hope to die. Drinking dark whiskey and telling white lies. Drinking dark whiskey and telling white lies.
All right. bring it
Cousin
back.
Shane and Shakes
Hello.
Pennington in the house.
Look at that. Yes, because that'll be my fire starter. We got some rain coming in, but then it's supposed to subside. So I've got kindling in there, but I threw a bunch of cardboard to help it start. Whiskey Scout's going to pull that up. That's all I was talking about. That was good. Good.
And I don't know if everybody that's watching could see this, but on the bottom right of my screen, when the music was playing, all I could see was a very pixelated image of you two guys dancing.
That's right. We get into it.
Um,
And I poured some more. I'm breaking my 1 ounce limit.
Yeah, but you can afford to do that with Tomatin, right?
That's true. And
yeah.
Mash and Drum, who's probably watching, is going to get the Turn That Frown Upside Down shirt.
Yeah.
We've seen a prequel of that as well. That's going to happen in Mash and Drum. Yeah, you can definitely afford to do that with the Tomatin. So let's see, what else? Where are we at? 5:31. We got plenty of time.
Tom R notices there hasn't been a single Velvet Elvis. There was just about one earlier.
Really? When?
I don't even remember. You were going.
I was going. Yelling Schnell?
No, it wasn't. I don't know. It was even up
Scott Adamson gave me a Velvet Elvis at the visitor center.
there. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Don't even know what that means.
What are you doing is what he came in.
I will point out to those watching, if you haven't seen Scott tune in or be on our live streams before, Scott does work for Tomatin, but he's not afraid to talk about other whiskeys either,
Right.
that he enjoys, that he likes.
Yep.
I mean, it's not just Tomatin that's out there. Like us, I mean, we know there's other whiskey tubers.
Right.
We're not in competition
We
with
talk
anybody.
about the tribe all the time.
Yeah,
Guys,
everybody.
Four Dummies, Roy,
Yeah. Really, I mean, it's a whiskey community, and I know some distillers are that way, Tomatin included, and I mean some aren't. They're pretty much inclusive. Tomatin is included they include other distilleries in the community.
Right. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
Well, we've had some ambassadors on. They can't even say that they've ever tried peated whiskey before or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on. I mean, like, well, we don't have a peated whiskey option and I'm like, yeah, but have you tried it? Well, yeah, you have no problem talking freely. So obviously you're not on like a cease and desist order.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think from my point of view, the best way for me to relate Tomatin to people is to find out what else they like, compare it to my thoughts with that whiskey and say, well, if you like that, I'm a fan of that as well. You should try some Tomatin. A lot of people that I see have never tried Tomatin before. So speaking about the other whiskies that they do know and love is a great way to break that barrier. And it just so happens that I'm a whiskey geek as well. So my job is to know everything there is to know about Tomatin, but my hobby is, like you guys, to try other whiskies and to take people's recommendations and pick up bottles when I can see them. So, like I said, when I was last over, I picked up a bottle of the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof on your recommendation as well. And it was very much, I know how much you guys like Tomatin. I know where your tastes lie. I'm probably going to like that Elijah Craig Barrel Proof if you speak so highly of that as well. And that's kind of my approach to speaking to people about Tomatin and whiskey as a whole.
Yeah, perfect.
So have you got? I forgot that you'd mentioned you'd pick that up. Have you tried it yet?
Oh yeah, there's a good dunt out of the bottle already. It's insane, isn't it?
That is, I mean, that's probably the best example of a bourbon and what a bourbon should be.
Right. Yeah, it really. Go ahead.
It's not going to be your daily drinking bourbon.
Yep.
It's pretty full powered. But if you want to really understand what a bourbon can be, that is a great place to go.
Yes.
This is like kissing a redhead. You don't do it all the time, but when it's special.
Whoa,
You've never been to Scotland. That's what you can do.
Cousin Shane's take on the Tomatin PX Distillery.
Yeah, it's like kissing a redhead. You don't do it all the time, but when you do it special. But see, Robert Licorice from Iron Root is a redhead, and he's like, you can kiss me all day long.
That's right.
Yeah. I think it's time that you guys turn the camera around so that we can see what's going on behind it.
We should. Yeah, that was a little bit of we'll have to have Cousin Shane. Cousin Shane actually has all kinds of stuff. He'll wander on that. Next time, wander all the way on. We'll take you all the way on for that one.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys, we had talked about Tomatin quite a lot on the streams before, and you tried a lot of Tomatin. What was your impressions when you got to the distillery, when you had a look around? Is it what you imagined it would be? Is it something different?
I had no idea that you guys were so big.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking of the ability to put out volume and the history. And so that was historical wise, that was really new to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That and similar to Boonhaven, I mean, it's still, you got the new visitor center, but your warehouses still have that black whiskey coating on everything.
Well, the bacteria, the alcohol-eating fungus.
Fungus.
Right, but it's real.
Everywhere.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's not like you're
it's not polished.
Right.
It's not. The still room that got cleared out. I mean, that's pretty polished.
Well, no, everything inside's gorgeous. We're referencing something else.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
think that is.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. There's lots of distilleries you can go to, and they're absolutely beautiful. And there's a bit of me that would love if that was the case, where we had the nice flooring and the perfectly painted walls and that. But I think with Tomatin, it wouldn't be real, And there is something in that industrial nature of the distillery that is also the heart of the spirit that you taste. It's very much the distillery, when it was built 122 years ago, wasn't built for a postcard or for an Instagram post. It was built to produce whiskey.
Right.
And it's really only in the last couple of years that we've started to even think of the image of the place as a whole. But then any of that sort of side of things is washed away when you walk into Warehouse 6 and you have that Dunnage warehouse experience, and you smell the alcohol, you see the casks, you see the mold, the fungus growing. It's just right back to whiskey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the spiderweb cobwebs and the edge of the barrels.
Yeah.
They've been there for, what was the one, 1973?
It was a 76 we tried.
76, yes.
Yeah. So 1976 is one of those really weird. I've always said that whiskey doesn't have vintages in the same way that wine has. There are wine vintages that are well known for being better than others. But 1976 Tomatin seems to be one of those golden years. I've never tried anything bad from there. I've never heard anyone who's tried anything bad from there. And it's odd that there's a couple of other distilleries that are known for that year as well. So the likes of Ben Riach from 1976 is incredible liquid too.
A couple things real quick. Sunday Evening Scotch commented a little bit ago. He said, I first tried Tomatin basically due to the business model you mentioned earlier. It was $28 for the 12-year. So I thought, why not? And now it's a beloved distillery for me. And that was from Sunday Evening Scotch.
Very nice.
Peter White is asking, he said, ask Scott if I should pull the trigger on a 1982 to 2010 single cask.
Definitely. I've never tried it, but definitely.
Yeah, sounds good.
What are you even asking for? Just go and buy it now.
Yeah, go get it.
Yeah.
DH Silv 2 wants us to give Cousin Shane's wife a call. He wants her commentary on the redhead. The redhead.
Yeah. Maybe she died for
that Cousin Shane's wife is a redhead, and she doesn't get kissed very often.
We know her.
Yeah, we know her.
We know her. Rhonda. We know
her. Tom R is asking how many employees live on the distillery grounds.
So at the distillery, we have 30 cottages, and they're all distillery workers. Some of them have one distillery worker and their family. In some cases, there's a couple of members of the family living on site. So we say that up to 80% of the staff, it's probably right now, because we're in the middle of the tourist season and we've got a few more tour guides on, I'd say about half of the people employed by the distillery are living on site. So that's 35, 40 people.
Does Bart, your Cooper, live on site?
He does. Yeah, you drove past his house on the way out.
All right. We got to meet him. I gave him a coin.
So does his mum and dad, who are Rose, our office manager, and Bruce, our forklift driver. They live on site as well.
Very cool. I love it. That's good.
Yeah. George Kaplan is asking, what's your take on the recent warehouse issues in Kentucky, including one collapse and one fire?
It's crazy.
Do you guys review your safety precautions when that happens? Or what do you guys do?
So the week that you guys got there, we had just knocked down Warehouse 12. I don't know if you remember talking about that a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, they're just tragic sort of events when things like that happen, and you hear of the Jim Beam one this week it was all young whiskey, and it seems like they're almost trying to pass that off. There's a little bit of, but what could that whiskey have become? That's 45,000 casks of whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the little bit of, that's 45,000 bourbon barrels that we won't be able to buy anymore, which is never nice. But yeah, so we definitely do. We have to make sure that our buildings are all to a safety and maintenance standard. As I mentioned, their warehouse 12 was knocked down a couple of months ago. The reason for that was it was a building that was built in the, I believe, late 60s, early 70s. And just with the weather at Tomatin, we get a lot of frost shattering. Not so much of that in Kentucky, I don't think. More lightning strikes and stuff like that. But we had a lot of frost shattering, and the foundations of the building weren't stable enough anymore. So we had to remove the casks from that warehouse and then knock the warehouse down. So that happened when you guys were over. Actually, we had just finished demolishing that, and it's always that case of just making sure everything's safe. Even within the warehouses now, we're having to add a lot more ladders and things like that for health and safety, in terms of making sure that the guys, when they're working in there, have safe fire exit routes and things like that. So as much as making whiskey is what we do, we have to make it in a safe way as well. But yeah, it's not nice to see all these barrels collapsing and things like that. Not great at all.
Can I ask a question?
Question coming from a scout.
I was thinking over in Europe, in Scotland, they used a lot of more single story warehouses. The dunnage warehouse are single story, not multi-story like you see.
I know you've had 2-story dunnage houses. How many stories do you usually have in your dunnage?
So we've got now 13 warehouses. 2 of them are dunnaged warehouses, and they are 2 stories high. And what you'll find in there is the casks will lie 1 or 2 above each other, and then there's the second floor, and that's it. The other 11 warehouses, and in fact, the one that was knocked down, are racked warehouses. So they're 1 story, but you've got 11 casks high in that. And it's much more like the Kentucky rick houses in that sense. But I've seen dunnage warehouses at other distilleries that are 3-4 stories high as well. So we definitely do. The traditional style are these low sunken dunnage single story buildings, but we do build them high nowadays.
Got it.
Well, we are
good. We're in the wrap up.
Yep.
Did you want to run the contest for these real quick? I don't know if we have time.
Nope. We'll run it next time.
We'll run it next time. We've had the song and everything else. So
song and conversation took us right up to quitting.
That's right.
time.
I love that. McKellen Rare, Holy Moses, you're my hero. Sorry, that's an interior discussion back and forth. My bad.
To hats.
Yeah, to hats.
All right. Well, it's 5:44, so let's wrap it up. I think Scott already said where to find him. Scott Adamson with Tomatin Distillery up by Inverness in the Highlands, the softer side of the Highlands, I believe is its build.
That's right.
And we are going to need a shirt that just yells Schnell.
I don't think you need the shirt if you're there.
True. Schnell.
Yeah, Schnell.
Scotch it, you Scotch gods.
Thanks, Scott, for joining us.
Thanks
everybody tuning in. Sláinte.
See you later. See you guys.